Okay, after a short break from making rules videos, I'm back and I'm hoping to make as many as 5 tonight. We'll see how well that goes. And the first of these will be kind of short and sweet. I wanted to start out talking about how to position or reposition after a pick is called. And there's a really nice example of this in a game from 2 weeks ago. So you'll see a pick developing here right off the bat. This kind of starts with a comical moment because Tierney here had pulled the disc so that it actually went through the gate in the soccer center fence, and Dauber will bring it back into play, and then I'll just show you what happens and talk a little bit more about it after that. So here we go.
Hey guys.
All right, so this is a really nice example. Might turn up the sound here a little bit of the pick. You can see it develop quite easily because Sonny's going to pick off John Ma here, who's trying to defend Avery Berman. And you also see a nice example, at least in principle, of how to reposition after the pick is called. So let's watch it one more time, then I'll continue on until everybody repositions themselves. So here we go. Dauber's bringing the disc in. Pick occurs right about there as Dauber is sort of cranking up to throw this hammer. John Ma calls it right about there. The disc is already away. That's going to be slightly relevant later. Long throw, Avery catches it, not quite a score. But then Avery sends this back, of course, because John Ma was picked off of him. And then Avery also walks all the way back. So this is something that is shown nice and clearly here, but it's not something you always see after a pick call. So I wanted to go back and review what the actual rule here is, and then we'll return and see how well everybody followed it. So this is in 16I. So I think we've covered some of this before, but just to review, part 1, a pick occurs whenever an offensive player moves in a manner that causes a defensive player guarding an offensive player to be obstructed by another player. Obstruction may result from contact with or the need to avoid the obstructing player, so that clearly happened here because John Ma had to avoid another offensive player. Part 2, a pick can only be called by the obstructed player, which again happened here, and must be announced by loudly calling pick immediately after it occurs, so we're all good. If play stops according to 16C, and I'll show you that in a second, players reposition according to 16C4. So if you go in the rules online, this is in red because it expands a little bit upon what this is trying to say here. So the repositioning clause in red says, so if the disc is returned to the thrower, everyone resumes the locations they occupied at the earlier of the time of the throw or the time of the call. So I've seen this in a lot of cases where pick gets called and people just stop and they don't return to where they were before or at the time of the call. They just stop, and then what happens then sometimes is the second part. In addition, the obstructed player is then allowed to move to recover the relative position lost because of the pick. And then the pick defender catches up the relative position lost because of the pick. If he was trailing by 9 feet, then he gets to catch back up to 9 feet away, but does not get to set up right next to the offensive player. They did this correctly in principle. We'll look a little more closely about how close they were to the original position that was lost. I want to go over to 16C4 here, however. This is positioning after a call. I forgot to add the 4 here, but it's part of the rules. Save that for later. We'll go to part A. If no pass is thrown or attempted before the thrower stops play by acknowledging the call, all players return to the locations they occupied when the call was made. We did have a pass that was thrown here or attempted before the thrower acknowledges the call, or the call is made after the throwing attempt. And if position reverts to the thrower, all players return to the locations they occupied at the earlier of A, the time of the throw, B, the time of the call. This is what we're dealing with here, is this particular instance or set of circumstances. If we go back, I think I showed you this already. and we look at what was earlier, the time of the call or the time of the throw, they're almost simultaneous. That's when pick is called, and this is where the disc is. So if we only go back about 3 frames or so, which is about a tenth of a second, they're right here. Technically, this is where they should reposition themselves. Likewise, you can see some of the other matchups here with Ray and Alex, Sonny and Elise. This is where everybody should be going to, in theory. Often, when you actually want to play like this, it's hard to remember exactly where close time. So Avery does go back. Avery actually is a little over generous by his repositioning. So Avery doesn't stop about here. He actually had about a step on John Ma, which is where he should have gone to. These two players aren't even going to be close. Ray and Alex are in the right position, but they weren't really moving a whole lot anyways. Avery's actually going to go all the way back to where he was sort of before he started running. Like I said, he's over generous. This should have been back here, and he should have been basically a step away from John Ma. That's the rule for repositioning after pick. For me, I think the take-home message is if a pick is called, then you have to revert to the position you revert to is the position you had when the call was made. You don't just stop and act as if you can allow the defensive player to catch up to where you were because there was lost ground. You as an offensive player, if your defensive mark has been picked off of you, you have to go back to where you were when the pick was called, or if where the throw happened, if that was earlier than the pick call. Okay, hopefully that's clear, but that's it for this, what I thought would be short but sweet video. I've got a couple more coming up very soon.